What happened when an undercover CEO boarded her own luxury cruise ship, only to discover that vulnerable senior guests were being scammed by the very staff meant to care for them? Welcome, brilliant listeners. Your curiosity always leads you to the stories that matter. Stories about truth, courage, and the quiet power of doing what's right. Today's journey follows a wise woman who, armed with nothing but grace and grit, dismantles a corrupt system from within. If you believe character still counts, and justice should never retire, you're in the right place. Let's set sail into a story you won't forget. The sun had barely begun to rise over the coastal cemetery when Vivian Hale placed a single white rose beside her husband's name etched into granite. The morning air was cool, briny with the scent of the ocean, and it stirred her silver hair beneath the wide-brimmed straw hat she wore. Not for style, but for memory. Her husband, Walter, loved sunrises. He used to say a good morning light could cleanse even the worst storms from a man's heart. He had also believed deeply in people, in fairness, in community, and in the quiet dignity of old age. Together they had built Horizon Voyages from the ground up, not just as a cruise line, but as a floating sanctuary where retirees could find joy and safety in their golden years. But that dream, Vivian feared, had begun to corrode. Since Walter's passing 5 years ago, she'd stepped back from daily operations, trusting others to uphold the values they'd carved into the company's core. Yet whispers had begun to reach her, emails forwarded by retired staff, late-night phone calls from former captains, and most recently, a handwritten letter from a guest named Esther Goodman. The letter was simple and heartbreaking. Extra charges she hadn't agreed to, a wellness package she couldn't opt out of, and a ship where smiling staff seemed too afraid to speak freely. It had all sounded wrong, predatory, cold. Nothing like the dream she and Walter had poured their lives into. Now, dressed modestly in light cruise wear and sensible shoes, Vivian stood ready to board the Ocean Reverie, the very ship Walter had personally christened years ago. But this time, she wouldn't be arriving as a founder or owner. Her name wouldn't appear on any welcome list. She'd booked her passage under an alias, carrying only a basic ID, a prepaid account, and a small leather purse that held a hidden recording device. Vivian wasn't here for cocktails or shuffleboard. She was here to find out what had gone wrong and who had forgotten the promise she and Walter made to every guest who stepped aboard, that this ship would be their home, not a trap. She whispered to the stone as she turned to leave. "I'll fix it, Walter. I promise." Then she walked away without looking back, her cruise just beginning. The Ocean Reverie gleamed like a floating palace beneath the late morning sun, her white hull pristine, her navy trim cutting a bold line against the turquoise horizon. As Vivian Hale approached the gangway, she paused for just a moment, taking in the ship's familiar grandeur. It had been years since she last walked her own decks, and though she wore the face of an ordinary retiree, her eyes held the weight of ownership. No one greeted her by name this time. No champagne, no corporate staff. Just a pair of young cruise reps in tight uniforms and forced smiles, scanning guest IDs with robotic efficiency. "Next," one of them called. Vivian stepped forward, her fake name tag clipped neatly to her beige travel cardigan, the kind of forgettable outfit she'd chosen precisely so no one would look twice. "Enjoy your cruise, Ms. Hartley," the girl chirped as she handed over a plastic keycard. "And don't forget to ask about our elite wellness upgrades, this week only." Vivian nodded politely and stepped aboard. Inside, the opulence was still there, polished marble floors, glittering chandeliers, velvet seating, and soft golds and blues, but the warmth felt manufactured. Staff members greeted her with rehearsed pleasantries, but their eyes darted elsewhere, constantly scanning for something or someone else. It didn't take long for Vivian to see what had changed. At the reception desk, an elderly man tried to question a $150.00 charge labeled Mandatory Health Orientation. He was dismissed with a smile and a brochure. Near the elevators, a frail woman stood awkwardly while a sharply dressed man in a navy blazer coaxed her into upgrading to a Diamond Serenity spa retreat. The pitch was smooth, almost soothing, and laced with urgency. "Limited rooms left," he said, "and at your age, why wait to feel amazing?" The woman hesitated. He gently tapped her shoulder. "Besides, you deserve this." Vivian recognized the man instantly from the internal complaints she'd reviewed before sailing. Colin Merrick, Guest Experience Manager. His record was spotless, on paper, but guest surveys told a different story. Manipulation, surprise charges, dismissive behavior, and worst of all, targeting seniors under the guise of care. Now, watching him work in real time, she saw the truth. He wasn't selling wellness, he was selling illusions. As she made her way to her stateroom, Vivian kept her expression neutral, but her mind was racing. This wasn't just about a few bad policies. This was an ecosystem, a machine running on vulnerability and confusion. She was no longer simply investigating, she was entering enemy territory. She opened the door to her modest room, dropped her bag, and glanced in the mirror. "Let's see how deep this rot goes," she whispered. 2 days into the voyage, Vivian Hale found herself seated in the softly lit Wellness Concierge Suite, a room intentionally designed to disarm. The scent of lavender oil drifted through the air and instrumental harp music played low beneath the hushed murmur of the artificial waterfall near the corner wall. Colin Merrick entered like he owned the ship, or wanted to. His suit was pressed, his smile pre-installed, and his voice dipped into a near whisper, as if offering secrets too elite for ordinary passengers. "Ms. Hartley," he greeted, extending a manicured hand. "I've reviewed your guest profile, and based on your interests, I believe I have the perfect upgrade package for you." He slid a sleek tablet toward her. On screen, the Diamond Serenity Spa experience, a bundled retreat of sunrise meditations, private hot stone therapy, exclusive meal plans, and priority access to wellness classes. Vivian leaned forward with feigned interest, adjusting her reading glasses. "What would that cost?" she asked sweetly. Colin didn't flinch. "For someone of your age and, let's say, refined lifestyle, we can offer a financing option through our onboard loyalty program. Just $199, 0 cents down, and then a manageable $349, 0 cents a month, 0 due today. It's nearly invisible on your account." Vivian's eyebrows arched. "How many months?" "Well, it depends. There's a flexible rate, but you'll want to act fast. The special introductory interest rate is 17.9% for the first 6 months. Vivian kept her voice steady. "And after that?" "It adjusts based on market conditions, typically to 24.3%, give or take a point. But again, most guests don't carry it that long." He smiled. "It's built for ease." She blinked slowly. "And if I wanted to pay it off early?" Colin paused. "There's a small prepayment fee, 10% of the remaining balance, but it's more of an adjustment than a penalty." Vivian tapped the tablet. "Can I take this to review?" He chuckled. "Unfortunately, these offers are time-sensitive. Once you leave this room, the rate expires, and your suite slot will likely go to someone else." From behind her modest demeanor, Vivian noted every tactic, urgency, confusion, patronization. She took mental snapshots of the fine print while her hidden recorder captured every word. Just as Colin leaned in, gesturing to a signature line, he added with casual smugness, "Between us, these packages were designed with guests like you in mind, seniors who deserve comfort but don't want the stress of fine details. You understand." Vivian offered a small smile as she slid the tablet back. "I do," she said softly, "more than you know." The morning sun filtered gently through the frosted windows of the onboard solarium, casting golden patterns across the white teak floor. Vivian Hale sat in a wicker lounge chair, sipping chamomile tea and pretending to read a spa brochure. In truth, she was observing, watching the staff, the guests, the subtle unease in the air. That's when she noticed Esther Goodman. The woman was seated a few chairs down, her legs crossed neatly at the ankle, hands folded over a crumpled receipt she seemed to be reading for the third time. She was small, maybe 5 feet tall, dressed in a light lilac cardigan and beige slacks, the kind of outfit chosen for comfort rather than style. Her face bore the soft lines of a life well lived, but her eyes were tired, almost wary. Vivian leaned over gently. "Excuse me, is that the spa menu? I was wondering if the massage prices are listed somewhere." Esther looked up, startled, then smiled weakly. "Oh, no, dear. This is my receipt for the Healing Horizons package." Her voice trembled slightly. They told me it was $499.00 for the whole week, but this, she handed Vivian the paper, her hands shaking slightly. It says I agreed to a premium daily rate. That's $999.00 total, plus an activation fee, and a $79.00 towel service I never used. Vivian scanned the charges. They were worse than misleading. They were layered like a trap. The included amenities were each itemized with asterisks and footnotes in microscopic font. "Did they explain any of this to you?" she asked softly. "Not really," Esther replied. "There was a young woman, very kind, who said I looked like I needed peace. She walked me to the spa desk, handed me some cucumber water, and asked if I wanted to feel like myself again. Next thing I know, they're giving me a robe and saying I'm all set. I thought it was part of the senior welcome package." Vivian's jaw tightened. Esther looked away, embarrassed. "I haven't told my daughter. She'll say I got taken advantage of. Again." "You didn't," Vivian said gently. "They're just very good at making people trust them." Esther offered a sad smile. "I miss when travel was simple, when people looked out for you. My husband and I used to cruise all the time. Never had to worry about hidden fees or slick salespeople." Vivian reached over and touched her hand. "I'm sorry, Esther. And I promise you, someone is going to look out for you now." For the first time that morning, Esther's smile reached her eyes. That evening, the ship's grand atrium glowed under cascading chandeliers, and laughter echoed from the piano lounge, where passengers sipped overpriced cocktails and danced to slow jazz. Vivian sat alone at a quiet table in the corner, slowly stirring her tea with a silver spoon as she reviewed her notes on Esther's spa charges. Her mind was focused, her expression calm, but beneath her gentle facade was a fire beginning to burn. She needed proof, not just testimonials, but cold, undeniable evidence of what was happening on this ship. That's when she noticed Nina. The young waitress had been assigned to Vivian's table 2 nights in a row. Barely in her 20s, with a timid smile and careful steps, Nina had the demeanor of someone used to being overlooked. Tonight, however, she kept glancing at Vivian with something more than politeness. On her next pass, she subtly slid a folded cocktail napkin onto Vivian's saucer, her hand trembling slightly as she placed it down. "More lemon for your tea, ma'am," she said aloud, then walked away quickly. Vivian waited a moment before unfolding the napkin. Inside was a tiny flash drive, taped securely and wrapped in plastic. Below it, written in neat, slanted handwriting, "Trust is dangerous here. Use this when you're alone." Later that night, behind the locked door of her stateroom, Vivian inserted the drive into her laptop. What she found made her stomach tighten. Dozens of internal memos, spreadsheets, and email chains coded with company lingo revealed a systemic program of exploitation. Guest profiles flagged with notes like "low cognitive alert," "emotionally vulnerable," and "recent widower" were targeted for high-yield upsell scripts. One spreadsheet outlined commission bonuses based on elderly conversion rates. Another detailed penalties for staff who failed to meet spa suggestion quotas during senior weeks. Several documents were marked confidential with the initials CM. Colin Merrick. Vivian leaned back in her chair, stunned. This wasn't one manager running amok. It was an entire structure engineered to bleed the trust and money out of the very demographic the cruise line claimed to honor. The next morning, Vivian spotted Nina near the aft dining lounge, quietly replenishing condiments. She approached with care. "You took a risk," Vivian said softly. Nina froze, eyes wide. "Don't worry. You did the right thing." Nina lowered her gaze. "I didn't know who you were, but you looked like someone who might listen." Vivian nodded. "I did, and now I'm going to act. But I need your help again, if you're willing." After a long pause, Nina gave a faint but resolute nod. "Whatever it takes." Vivian smiled. "Good, because justice is coming to this ship, and it's starting in the shadows." By the 4th day at sea, the ocean reverie had settled into a rhythm. Sun-drenched deck games, champagne tastings, and choreographed smiles from staff who had learned to blend performance with hospitality. but behind the scenes, the tension was mounting. Vivian Hale knew her time as a passive observer was ending. The documents Nina had provided were irrefutable. All she needed now was the final piece, Colin Merrick, in his own words, showing exactly who he was when he thought no one important was watching. So when Vivian received a formal invitation slipped under her door, embossed with gold trim and Colin's signature at the bottom, she smiled knowingly. Private guest consultation. VIP Serenity Experience. 3:00 p.m. in the captain's lounge. She arrived 10 minutes early, dressed in soft linen, her reading glasses hanging from a delicate chain, playing the role he expected, wealthy, older, and just confused enough to sign without reading. The captain's lounge, though rarely used, was lavish. Mahogany bar, velvet chairs, and panoramic views of the open sea. Colin greeted her with a glass of cucumber water and a rehearsed warmth. "Ms. Hartley," he said, "I must say, it's been a pleasure having you on board. I think today's offer will make your cruise unforgettable." He laid out the pitch with polish, only this time it was dialed up. The Diamond Serenity Spa bundled with exclusive dining, private deck access, and a customized legacy keepsake package, all at a founder's tier rate. He leaned in. "We don't normally offer this. In fact, I'm bending policy to make it happen." Vivian tilted her head. "And how would I pay for this?" "Through our premium wellness credit line," he said, tapping on the tablet. "Just 18.5% interest now, adjusted quarterly. We use your cabin account as security. If needed, we can also reference your estate. It's seamless." Vivian squinted. "Would I be able to read through this at dinner?" Colin's smile hardened. "Unfortunately, this is a real-time incentive. If you step out, it voids. I can't hold it for you." Then came the final nudge. The one that chilled her. "You know, most of our senior guests don't want the stress of fine print. They want peace, trust, someone to handle the boring stuff. That's what I'm offering." Vivian set the tablet down gently. "And the ones who read everything?" He chuckled. "They usually come back begging for the original deal, once they realize what they missed." She gave a soft laugh. "I imagine they do." Inside, Vivian's heart pounded, not from fear, but from clarity. She had what she came for. The mask had slipped, and Colin Merrick had no idea who he had just exposed himself to. That night, long after the final deck chairs had been stacked and the atrium chandeliers dimmed to a soft glow, Vivian Hale made her way through the hushed corridor leading to the captain's quarters. Gone was the soft-spoken guest in linen. She now moved with the quiet authority of someone who had carried empires on her shoulders. She called ahead using a secure line meant for executives, identifying herself not as Miss Hartley, but as Vivian Hale, founder and chairwoman of Horizon Voyages. Captain Louis Atwood, a man with 30 years at sea and an impeccable record, opened the door himself. He looked equal parts surprised and honored. "Mrs. Hale," he said, stepping aside, "I didn't expect to meet you under undercover conditions." Vivian smiled thinly. "Neither did I. But I've received too many letters, too many broken hearts, and I needed to see it for myself." She placed a folder on his desk and opened it with practiced ease. Printed screenshots from Nina's flash drive, transcripts of Colin's upsell pitch, and guest feedback cards marked "Never Escalated." The captain skimmed the pages, his brow furrowing deeper with each line. "This is systematic," he said finally. "It's predatory," she corrected, her voice cool. "My husband built this line to give seniors a haven. Now they're being hunted on their own vacations." Captain Atwood looked up. "What would you like me to do?" Vivian paused, choosing her words carefully. "I want discretion, for now. We dock in Nassau in 3 days. I've arranged for our Director of Guest Integrity, Jonas Fields, to meet us there. There will be a closed-door session with select board members. I need your cooperation in ensuring Colin Merrick doesn't suspect a thing." He nodded solemnly. "And if he does? Then he may jump ship before we can show the world what he really is." Vivian stood and straightened her blazer. "Until then, I'm just another guest who asked too many questions." As she turned to leave, the captain asked, "Why come yourself, Mrs. Hale? You could have sent someone." She paused at the doorway, her eyes glinting with quiet resolve. "Because this isn't just business. it's personal. And because sometimes the only way to clean out rot is to shine a light on it yourself. And with that, she disappeared down the corridor, unnoticed by the rest of the sleeping ship, except for the handful of crew who had started to realize that this elderly woman wasn't who she seemed, and that change was already underway. The Ocean Reverie's grand ballroom shimmered that evening with gold-draped tables, chandeliers reflecting off crystal glasses, and a string quartet playing light waltzes near the stage. It was the final formal night of the cruise, a tradition meant to leave guests with warm memories and glossy photos. But tonight Vivian Hale had something else in mind. She arrived early, dressed in a tailored navy pantsuit with a silver brooch in the shape of a compass, Walter's gift from their first voyage. As guests filtered in, Colin Merrick worked the room like a seasoned politician, shaking hands, exchanging toasts, and soaking in every compliment. He had arranged for a surprise announcement that night, one he hoped would mark his ascension: Regional Director of Guest Experience. The projection screen behind the stage displayed a looping slideshow of smiling passengers, many of whom had unknowingly signed contracts that would haunt them for months. At precisely 8:15, the lights dimmed, and a cheerful cruise director took the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our very own Colin Merrick for a special presentation." Applause rippled across the room as Colin stepped onto the stage, holding a champagne flute brimming with confidence. "Thank you," he began. "It's been my honor to serve you this week. At Horizon Voyages, we don't just offer travel, we offer transformation, and we owe that to guests like you." Before he could continue, a second spotlight flicked on at the side of the room. Vivian stepped forward, flanked by Captain Atwood and a tall, composed man in a charcoal suit, Jonas Fields, Director of Guest Integrity. The murmurs began immediately. Vivian's poise was striking, her voice firm yet calm as she took the mic. "My name is Vivian Hale. You may know me as Miss Hartley, the solo traveler in 7B, but in truth, I am the founder and chairwoman of Horizon Voyages." Gasps spread across the ballroom like a wave. Colin froze mid-test, color draining from his face. Vivian continued, "I created this company with my husband to provide joy, comfort, and dignity to retirees. But recently, I've been made aware of practices that betray those values, and I came aboard to see the truth for myself." Behind her, the screen changed. Guest receipts, contract excerpts, and internal emails appeared, each more damning than the last. Vivian held up a tablet. "We have recordings, witness statements, and confirmation of policies designed to confuse and exploit." Colin sputtered, I didn't know who you were." "That," Vivian said, meeting his eyes coldly, "is exactly the problem." Silence fell, thick and heavy. No one applauded this time. Colin slowly lowered his glass and for the first time realized the ship was no longer his stage. Colin Merrick stood rigid at the center of the ballroom, eyes darting toward the exits, but he was surrounded by executives, crew, and passengers who had once smiled politely and now started with mounting disgust. Behind him, the projection screen displayed a guest contract annotated in red, each clause a landmine: a 24.3% variable interest rate after 6 months, a 10% early repayment fee, automatic property liens for delinquent payments, all buried in legal jargon and offered exclusively to senior guests. Jonas Fields took the microphone next, his tone measured and professional. "Over the past year, this ship has reported a surge in premium upsells during senior voyages. Yet refund requests, guest complaints, and disputed charges mysteriously vanished from our internal reports." He looked directly at Colin. "Until now." Vivian stepped forward again, holding a sleek black tablet. "You should hear it in his own words." She pressed play. Colin's voice crackled to life through the ballroom speakers. "They don't read. They sign because they're lonely or confused. Half of them can't even hear properly. It's like pulling candy from a baby, except the candy is a condo." Nervous laughter died in the throats of some guests. Others gasped or covered their mouths. Another voice followed, Nina's. "You told us to focus on recent widows, that they were emotionally vulnerable and less likely to ask questions?" Vivian paused the playback. This wasn't negligence, this was predation. Esther Goodman, seated in the front row with trembling hands, rose to her feet. "He lied to me," she said, her voice cracking. "Made me believe I needed something I didn't. Took my savings and smiled while doing it." The room was silent except for the low whir of the projector. Vivian turned to the captain. "Do we have reason to believe these practices extend beyond this voyage?" Captain Atwood nodded. "Based on Nina's evidence and flagged accounts on multiple ships, yes, it's widespread." Collins snapped. "This is a setup. I was following a strategy the corporate told me to push upgrades." He turned to Jonas. "You approved those packages." Jonas shook his head calmly. "No. You built a hybrid product, combining pieces of authorized services into something unapproved and untraceable. That's fraud." Security officers stepped into the room, their presence quiet but unmistakable. Vivian turned to the guests. "Horizon Voyages was built on trust. We cannot undo what's been done, but we can ensure this never happens again." She faced Colin one last time. "Your employment is terminated, effective immediately." Colin's voice dropped to a whisper as they took him by the arm. "You can't do this!" Vivian's reply was soft, but final. "I just did." And as he was led out, the ballroom erupted, not in cheers, but in a standing ovation for the truth. 2 weeks after disembarking the Ocean Reverie, Vivian Hale sat at her kitchen table in the quiet glow of a coastal morning. A steaming cup of Earl Grey sat beside her, reading glasses, untouched, as she opened the small envelope that had arrived in the mail. Inside was a photo, her granddaughter Mia, standing proudly in front of a quaint storefront painted robin's egg blue. Above the doorway, in gold cursive letters, was the name, Viv's Hearth. Tucked behind the photo was a note. "Grandma, I used your gift to open the bakery. I named it after you, because you taught me what it means to care for people. Grandpa would be so proud. Come visit soon. I'll make your favorite pie." Vivian smiled, eyes misting with warmth and pride. She gently set the photo on the table and looked out the window where the garden was just beginning to bloom. Spring had arrived. In the distance, gulls circled lazily above the ocean. On the corner of the table sat a thick manila envelope, marked with the passenger manifest for another cruise ship under another name. Her work wasn't done. She reached for it slowly, not out of duty, but with a sense of purpose. In a world that often mistook softness for weakness, she had learned to wield kindness like a blade, and when people tried to take advantage of those too polite to fight back, she reminded them that integrity doesn't retire. She picked up her tea, warm now in her hands, and whispered to the empty room, "One more trip." Then she began to plan. The story of Vivian Hale teaches us that age is not a limitation, it's a strength, especially when paired with wisdom, integrity, and quiet resolve. Through her undercover journey aboard the Ocean Reverie, we learn that true leadership doesn't demand attention. It observes, listens, and acts when it matters most. Vivian's willingness to disguise herself and experience injustice firsthand reflects a powerful lesson. To protect others, especially the vulnerable, sometimes you must walk in their shoes. The story also exposes the danger of exploitation hidden behind politeness and corporate polish. Colin Merrick's downfall reminds us that those who prey on the trust of others often underestimate the quiet ones, the invisible seniors, the kind staffers like Nina, the loyal guests like Esther. Ultimately, the narrative underscores that real change begins with personal courage. One woman's decision to stand up for what's right led to systemic reform, not just punishment. It's a reminder that legacy isn't about titles or buildings, it's about the values we leave behind and the people we empower. And perhaps the most enduring truth of all, kindness is never weakness. When wielded with conviction, it becomes the sharpest form of justice.